Nandi I'm doing it from my head. Is Mazani? That's me. Yeah, great name. Is from South Africa. She's a migrant worker working in children's social care, and she's come out from Hastings. She's a community activist and a Unison rep, I believe. It's been my brain. Welcome to Nandi. Thank you.
Everyone. Louise, you couldn't have said that better. You had Gary lead up to Rachel, and then unknowingly Rachel's been to South Africa and I'm South African. And so great segues. I'm a migrant worker. I came to East Sussex in 2022. From South Africa, always worked with young people, not only in South Africa, I've worked with young people in India and in Thailand and in the US. And when the call was made, similarly to how the call was made for the Windrush generation in 2021, the Conservative government made a call for workers from around the world to come to the UK to work in the health and social care sector. And myself, like many others, I think the current numbers are at about 600,000 or so, health and social care workers responded to that call. And at the time when we were invited and got jobs in the UK, we were told that after 5 years of working and paying taxes in the UK, after you've paid for your visa, which you pay for every time your visa gets renewed, you would then, after 5 years, qualify for indefinite leave to remain, which would mean two things. One, you wouldn't be an indentured laborer, because one of the things when you come here to work, you are tied to the job that you have, which is really no different to what the British did during the time of the colony when they brought over indentured laborers to come and work. And people thinking we'd have to do this for 5 years, you'd have to be tied to a specific employer, and after 5 years you'd get indefinite leave to remain and be able to work freely within the UK. And initially you could bring your children and your family with you, and then in 2024 that was the first rollback. In 2024 they then said health and social care workers could not bring their children and could not bring their families. It made me think, working in social care, where's the paramountcy principle in that? What is in the best interest of children, of those families and of those workers who come and work in this country, who now have to be separated from their parents? I'm a mother myself, and I think I would have had to think seriously about coming to the UK if I couldn't bring my child. I mean, in some ways, I guess my child is a bit more lucky than other children because he is half British, and so therefore his circumstances are a bit more different. But for many, many families, being away from your child, I mean, when I first came, because I used to work for East Sussex County Council, when I first came, I was here for 6 months without my child, and that was really, really difficult. It was the first time I'd ever been away from him from that amount of time, and I can't imagine if it had been that, like parents who came after 2024, they didn't, well, at that point they had a date. They'd be separated from their children for 5 years. Then came last week Thursday, or rather the inklings of it were in July this year when they said, well, we may move indefinite leave to remain to 10 years. And people started thinking, And this move means, for most people who arrived after 2024, when the change happened, you then would be separated from your children and your family for that long until you got to this 10-year mark. And then last week, Thursday, the announcement by Shabana Mahmood said, well, in the same way we called and said we needed health and social care workers, they don't get paid enough. And this is the thing about indentured servitude, right? They don't get paid enough, so they're not going to pay as much taxes as the top 5%. So then we will keep them indentured to their employers for up to 15 years or more. And I think this is what we need to kind of begin to think and hear when politicians like Shabana Mahmood say that people who come to this country to work and pay their way, because you do not come to the UK for free. Because I think a lot of people think migrants, there's some, I don't know, there's some little pot of money that, pays for our tickets, pays our rent, etc. But this is not the truth, right? The truth is you pay for your visa, you come across, you work, you pay national insurance like everybody else. If you're renting, you pay council tax, you pay, whatever it costs you to rent. And the scary thing is, for a lot of people, I always say I've been very, very fortunate in that I've had very legitimate upfront employers in my journey, which has not been the case for a lot of people, because how the certificate of sponsorship system was created and put into force by the Home Office and the political leaders of this country created an ability for employers to, there's modern day slavery in the UK. There's lots of articles and lots of stories about it. So instead of addressing that, which was happening, the government instead decided to be punitive to those people who, like during the Windrush generation, came in answer to a call to help British people in the health and social care sector. A few days before this earned settlement for economic migrants to the UK, I think we should have expected it. You had the announcement again by Shabana Mahmood about refugees then going on to a 20-year, or rather, because at that point they wouldn't be refugees, asylum seekers would go on to a 20-year plan to earn settlement in the UK to then become refugees. And here's the distinction. The asylum seeking process anywhere in the world says that you need to get to not the first country, as people say often, you need to get to a country where you are safe. And I know that a lot of people, and that's what you hear in the media, that people come across on boats. So when I worked in South Africa, I worked, other than young people, I worked with LGBT plus asylum seekers who came from all across the African continent, and they came from as far as West Africa, North Africa, East Africa to South Africa. And between all of their countries, there were many countries until they got to South Africa. But you need to get there, however you get there. And often, to get to the UK, you have a lot of, yes, I am not saying there are not people who come across the channel, but many asylum seekers use legal pathways, and when they get to the UK, which is what international law says, is then you declare that you are seeking asylum. So, I mean, I don't know what the circumstance is for the almost 600 refugees who will be, or asylum seekers who will be housed in Crowborough. They may not have come on boats, they may have, come on using legal pathways, which is what you do. You find a way to safety. I come from what is called one of the greatest democracies in Africa, and we have very progressive LGBT legislation in South Africa, but as a Black lesbian woman, who I am likely to get killed at a higher rate than anybody else in that country. So technically, which is not what I did, but technically, a Black lesbian woman coming from South Africa would and should seek asylum anywhere if they needed to, because just this last Friday, on the 21st of November, South Africa shut the country down, so that, symbolically, because unfortunately, even though my country is one of what is called the greatest democracies of Africa, it is also a very dangerous country for women, right? We have women being you have approximately, if the numbers, at least the stats that you get, because not every woman who's raped talks about being raped, you have over 100 rapes a day in South Africa. Our president himself said it's a national crisis, but what we are calling for as women in South Africa is that it should be declared a national disaster, because then you will put funds and resources into resolving such a problem. So every time I hear the far right in this country talk about that immigrants are the problem, and then you actually look at the news, I think it was either in Kent next door or here in East Sussex recently, when they showed a number of men who were arrested for rape, and amongst all those pictures, I think not only arrested, they were charged and imprisoned for rape. They were all white British. But that didn't really make the news. But and I'm not saying any rape is less important than any other, but we need to get to a point where we recognize that gender-based violence against women is not perpetrated by the boogeyman who is an asylum seeker or a migrant coming from across the water. We need to have frank conversations. I think for me, it's like in the same way we're having frank conversations in South Africa about it is our men who are the threat, and the UK needs to get to a point where they're having those frank conversations, that it is British men who are the threat to British women, and not necessarily asylum seekers or refugees. I am not saying that when it does happen, when a refugee or asylum seeker should not be addressed, but what I'm saying is we need to start looking at what is true. But also when I think of what's happening, what they're proposing to do at the camp in Crowborough, it makes me think about when Britain came to South Africa, and in mining, where they started mining, they used to put 7 or more to a room in really, really cramped quarters of what were Black workers who worked on the mine. So I guess they are using playbooks that they've used time and time again across what used to be the empire on which the sun never set. I think the other thing which is important for me, Gary spoke about it, and I think it's migrant workers who are hardly ever talked about, or migrant workers who feed Britain. There's a special category for agricultural workers in this country who can only come to this country for about 6 months of the year and can never stay longer than those 6 months, and often live in appalling conditions And I know this because I did a stint as an agricultural worker, because I understood that a lot of South Africans may want to come across. So I did a stint of 6 months to see, and I was, absolutely astounded to see the conditions on farms in this country. They reminded me of South Africa pre-1994, where people are sharing a caravan, and people who don't know each other, mostly, fall to a caravan. And some of the farms, I remember I did a stint in a farm up in Staffordshire, Stratford upon Avon, and they expected two people who had never met to share double bed in a caravan, and I was just like, that's a bit strange. But when you're a migrant worker, you don't have any rights, and sadly in this country, even the unions don't organize with migrant farm laborers, so it's even harder for migrant workers who work on farms in the UK to have any sort of human rights. And these are the people who make sure that there's fruits and vegetables on the shelves in every shop across the UK. The last thing, because my time is running out, I think there's two big things for me. I think when the Supreme Court ruling happened last year in April 2024, I was really concerned not only for my trans siblings who are British, but then trans siblings who do come to this country because of the discrimination. And I mean, up until then, the UK was considered a very safe country for people who were trans. And that Supreme Court ruling changed that, because a lot of trans people do seek safety in the same way I was saying that siblings who are LGBT seek safety in different countries because of legislation in their own countries. But one of the calls, when I arrived, I initially stayed in Eastbourne for a little bit, but my home now is in Bexhill, and which is right next to Hastings, which when in 1066, it always reminds me that Britain, even though the British people keep on saying that this island, one of my neighbors said this recently, which was, kind of scary, that Britain should be for British people. This island is too small for people from outside. But then I learned that actually the Normans landed in Britain, and the Normans were French in 1066, and after many, many conquests before that, you had the Vikings and other people come across to build this nation, which is Britain. But I guess the migrants which are not welcome in Britain and make it an island of strangers are migrants like myself who are black and brown. And then in closing, I would like to invite people to support migrant workers on the 17th of December, when they will be going to a parliamentary meeting at Westminster to talk about these proposals that have been made by the Home Secretary recently. Thank you for listening.